G'day everyone, thanks for checking out my latest video. Now, this one's going to be a bit different than my last ones. It's going to be a bit of a rant, a bit of a rave, bit of a vlog, bit of a rambling series, whatever you want to call it. And I'm going to be talking about why I collect video games. Now, this is a question I get asked a lot. I've got a heap of games set up in my house. I haven't got a specific gaming room, but I've set them all up in my lounge room. Something that I take great pride in, something that I put a lot of money, a lot of effort into, is my collection. And people always ask me why. They don't understand. And so this is something that I've wanted to talk about for a while. Something I've wanted to just sit down and talk about and ramble about why I collect. So someone will come over and they'll see my collection and they'll be like, oh, that's pretty cool. Oh, hang on, there's some Super Nintendo games and some Mega Drive games. Oh, I remember playing these back in the day. Oh, why would you want to play retro games? They're old, you know. Why wouldn't you want to play a new PlayStation 4 game? And I say, well, hang on, you know, retro games are still really good. Still go back and play hundreds and hundreds of great games from my childhoods that are still hold up to these days. And they say, okay, well, fair enough. If you want to play them so bad, why don't you just download an emulator and play it on that? And I say, oh, well, you know, I much prefer to play it on a TV with a controller, you know, playing authentic, not playing an emulated version. They go, okay, cool. Then why have you got 1,000 video games? You're not going to play 1,000 video games. And I say, well, that's true. I'm not buying every video game to play. I'm buying them to collect because I enjoy it. And I don't think many people understand, and I always get asked why, and I feel like if I collected stamps or I collected records or I don't know, music or antique spoons or some shit, people wouldn't care. People wouldn't ask. They'd just accept it. They just go, okay, cool. It's just a collection. It's something that you collect. So that's what this video is for. I just wanted to just ramble a bit about why. So growing up, I never cared to collect or to hold on to my video games. I was more than happy to sell in order to buy new games. And it's just something I accepted. Well, I grew up in a fairly sort of average income, sort of middle class, you know, upper middle class house. You know, we could afford to buy video games every now and then, but it wasn't something that we could buy very often. So 9 times out of 10, if I wanted to play something new, I had to go to the corner store and rent it. And luckily, our corner store had a pretty good selection, so 9 times out of 10, I could always get the game that I was after. But every now and then, there was something that they just didn't stock, and I really wanted, and it was just you'd have to wait till Christmas or your birthday, and even then, it was like, well, there might be other things you want, so it might just be a game you have to pass up. So I rented, and I was more than happy to do that. And I'd every now and then I'd get a new game, and I'd trade it in for a different one, and I'd sell it and whatever. And that was fine. It wasn't until we learned about chipping our PlayStation 1 where we could have actually buy stacks and stacks of copied games. Now, I don't recommend, I don't condone piracy. I was just a kid, I didn't know any better, you know, and my parents were more than happy to pay $5 to get a guy to copy a game for me, and that way I could own it rather than having to go to the store and pay half that just to rent it for a weekend. Now, moving on to the PlayStation 2, it was the same thing. We never actually got our PS2 chipped, but I continued to rent from the corner store to play new games. Every now and then, mum and dad would buy me a new game, or I'd get one off Christmas from my nan, or I'd save up all my Christmas and birthday money or chore money, and I'd go out and buy something. But I was more than happy to go in and trade it at EB Games, which is, you know, GameStop, compared to GameStop in America, I guess. Um, and I had no qualms about that. I always took good care of my games. I didn't ruin them. I didn't lose them. But yeah, I never really cared about holding on to them. Once I was finished the game, I was more than happy to sell. So the PS2 came and went. I played hundreds and hundreds of games. By the end of the system's life, I owned maybe half a dozen. My PS2 had sort of taken a bit of damage. I'd lent it out to my cousins and my friends, and I think my brother had it in his room to play DVDs or something. I can't remember, but it was pretty banged up. So I had a handful of games, and I ended up trading them in to go towards a PS3. And I bought a PS3 on launch, and lo and behold, the PS3 had no games. The launch was abysmal for PS3, and apart from Uncharted, which I didn't pick up until much later because it flew under everyone's radar, there was nothing to play. So by the time it came out, I was 17 or 18 at the time. I had a job, I was working at Woolworths, the fresh food people, and I had a bit of money. So I thought, oh well, maybe this is a good chance to go back and play those PS1 and PS2 games that I missed out growing up. Now, because the PS3 when it came out was backwards compatible, so I thought this is perfect. So why don't I go back and buy some PS1 and PS2 games? I was really big into RPGs, and there was a heap of obscure RPGs that I'd never got a chance to play, and our corner store would have never stocked them because they were way too obscure. So that's what I did. I hopped up on eBay, and I'd bought a few DVDs and wrestling DVDs and stuff off eBay, but I'd never bought any games. So that's what I did. I started to buy old PS1 and PS2 games, and it was surprising because I expected them to be a couple of dollars, but some of these games were going for 10, 20, 30, 40, $50. And it was quite surprising to me. I didn't realize that people were still trading and buying these old games. So I bought a few games. I think the very first old school game that I bought after my PS3 was Medieval 1, because I really wanted to go back and play Medieval 1. And as I remember, when the PS3 came out, the PS1, PS2 classics hadn't even launched. So the only way to go back and play these was to buy the actual games. So I bought Medieval 1 and 2 because I was keen to go back and give them a play on my TV using my PS3. They upscaled them pretty well, so it was the easiest way to play rather than go back and actually buy a system. And so I was really surprised that there was all these people on eBay selling these games for large amounts of money, or at least what I thought was large at the time. Lo and behold, sort of 8 years later, that half the games I bought now, I wouldn't even bought then. I wouldn't even be able to get for double that now. Like, the prices have gone up huge. The amount of collectors that are out there now is just absurd. So anyway, so I picked up a couple of PS1 games, and I think I bought Shadow Hearts for PS2, and there was all these RPGs that I really wanted to play in Final Fantasy 7, 8, 9. I was keen to go back and play again, because the only games I actually owned by the time PS3 came out was a handful of PS2 games. And I think I had even traded them in at one point, or sold them at garage sale or something. So I've got these stacks of games on my shelf, and I think, yeah, they look pretty cool. I might buy a few more. Maybe I won't even sell them, because I had bought them with the intention of playing them and selling them, but at that point I was having second thoughts. I was thinking, oh, they look pretty cool. It's nice having a couple of old school sort of retro games. People, when my friends come over, they ask me about them and stuff like that, because they don't have them anymore. They've sold them years ago. So it's pretty cool. So I bought a few more, and so I started to look for more obscure games. So I went on YouTube and I was searching for, retro reviews and stuff like that. And that's when I found it. I found out there was this whole like community of old school sort of retro collectors and enthusiasts talking about old school games, reviewing them, talking about their collections. And I think that's when I started to really get interested in collecting. And I went, wow, there's communities of people out here. So I bought a few more. It was cool, I was buying mainly PS1. That was the system that I was mainly going to focus on, was PS1 and maybe PS2. Just get some old RPGs, and occasionally I'd buy more and more, and I'd play every game that I bought. And then I thought, well, I'd grown up with a Sega. My first system was a ColecoVision. Then I went to Mega Drive. Then I went to PS1. I never owned a Nintendo system, so I thought, I could go back and buy a SNES. I could go buy a Super Nintendo and play some Super Nintendo games. And I looked at the prices and I went, holy shit. Nintendo games are super expensive, and they're still probably the most expensive out of all the systems. Nintendo is obviously 9 times out of 10 always going to be more expensive than the equivalent games on on other systems. So I bought a Super Nintendo and I hooked it up to the TV, and I bought a few old school games and I was playing them and I was really enjoying it. But part of me, I at that point I'd passed on buying like cart only games. I wanted to own the box and the manual to feel like, I owned the game back in the day. So I had to drop some serious money to pick up just a couple of games. And by now I had a cute little selection of games. I had some PS1, some PS2, some PS3. I had some Super Nintendo games, and I thought, oh, I could, I never owned a Dreamcast back in the day. I never owned a Sega Saturn back in the day. Why don't I pick some of them up and go back and play some old school games, because I was enjoying it. I was finding that these retro games were holding up. They were still playable, still fun, and that's what I did. That's what I started to spend my money on, was old school retro gaming. And I bought more and more, and I branched out to different systems, and at one point I owned half a dozen different systems, and I was playing games on all different systems. I'd hot swap them on my TV and swap them out, and I'd play Dreamcast a couple of days. I'd swap that out with a Saturn, excuse me, and then I'd swap it out with a PS3, and I'd play some Drake's Adventure or something, and Uncharted, and Drake's Fortune. Sorry, not Drake's Adventure. And suddenly I had all these games, and I had no room, so I had to buy myself a bookcase to put to set them up. And so I was watching all these people on YouTube like Pete Dorr and Happy Console Gamer and Gamester81, and I can't remember. There was probably a few other sort of channels that were really pioneering back in the day. I remember Pete Dorr was one of the major ones that I found back in the day. And so here we are. I've got a bookshelf. I've got all these retro games on, and I'm enjoying it. And I'm learning about the games on YouTube. I'm learning about good old school sort of hidden gems. I'm learning about collections. I'm learning about rare games. I'm learning about what's good, what's bad. What's a good deal. What is stuff worth. And obviously everything on YouTube is very American centric, so a lot of the prices that they talk about aren't really relevant here, because we generally pay more, because there's obviously less collectors, less resellers here, less games than in America, so there's less opportunity, so we have to pay more. So within 6 months I'd made quite a decent little collection, and I was enjoying watching all these people on YouTube. So that's how I started. I didn't even start collecting until after I'd sold my everything I grew up with, all the games that I grew up with have gone. Everything in my collection now is stuff that I've bought since I was 17, since I had my own money. And believe me, in that little room at Mum and Dad's house, it got out of control. I had so many games. I had to put them in boxes. I had to stack them up. I had to hide them. I had to put them under my bed, in my wardrobe. It was crazy. Thankfully, I own a house now, so I've got a lot more room, but it's still not enough. I plan on buying something a bit bigger in the next year or two, and I'm going to work on my own little game room. I'm going to have my own game room. I'm going to put shelves up. I'm going to put mats down. I'm going to put posters up. It's going to be great. So that's how I got into collecting. I didn't even start until until after I had left school, after I'd started to get my own money. And just to think, to maybe if I held off on buying the PS3, held off on, and I just stuck with playing, newer games, maybe I wouldn't even collect nowadays. Maybe it's something that I wouldn't even do. I feel like I do have a very sort of collector-centric personality. Not a hoarder per se, but I'm into collecting now. I don't like throwing things away unless I absolutely know I don't need them. And I always try to buy things and keep things in box with manual and stuff. So I think if I didn't collect video games, I'd probably be collecting music or something else, or DVDs or something, because it would have materialized in a different fashion. So here I am, 8 or so years later. I've moved out of Mum and Dad's house. I've got my own house now, and I've been cataloging all my games on rfgeneration.com, which I think is probably the best best website you can use to catalog your video games. It's the most complete. It's probably one of the easiest ones to use as well, and it's very easy to submit new games if for some reason they're missing from the database. So I've been cataloging my games on there, and now I expect to hit 1,500 within the next few months. I've still got a few systems to go through, and yeah, it's something I'm heavily addicted into. I fell out of love with it for a few years. I was finding it hard to stay afloat with owning my own home, having a mortgage, and having a dog, and having responsibilities. It was hard, but I buckled down, and now I've got plenty of money that I can spend on video games, and obviously I spend way too much, and I need to dial it back because I've got plenty of things to save for, plenty of work to do to the house before I sell. But that's something I'm going to work on, and it's an addiction. It really is. It's just super addicting to buy that next big video game that you've got on your wish list, and get it for a bit cheaper than what other people have been paying for. It's super addicting. So that's why the question is why. Why do you collect video games? And the answer is, well, because I enjoy it, as I said. But the long answer is what I've just talked about, is something that I fell into. I had no games to play on my PS3, so I started to buy retro, and I liked the way they looked on my shelf. I liked the way they felt. I like picking up games for cheap, and here we are, 8 years later, and 1,500 games later, and there's no stopping it. So thank you if you've managed to make it through the last 15-20 minutes. Good effort, good work. Thank you for sticking around. Please like, subscribe, share. I plan to do more rambling videos, maybe talk about the systems that I grew up with, the games I grew up with. At the same time, I also want to talk about my collection that I have now. I want to do reviews. I want to do pickup videos. I'll probably will do a pickup video in the next few days. Talk about the systems that I own, the accessories, stuff like that. So yeah, if you've enjoyed it, please like, subscribe, comment. I always encourage people to comment, because if you've got your own little channel, it's a great way to network, to meet other people. And I've met a few people already through YouTube who've got their own little channels, and it's great. I love finding these little hidden gems. So thank you for listening to me ramble. I'll leave you with that. Thanks. Bye. Thanks. Bye. Thanks. Bye.